Hi, my name is Jamal Ashraf, and we're working on Java concept or a big Java book by Horstman. We are on chapter 6 with the loops, and we cover 3 parts already. And we're moving on to part 4. That's a do loop. So far, we covered a while loop, we covered for loop, and now we're going to do loop. So remember when we were doing the while loop and the for loop, we were talking about set, check, and change. So we had to set it first, then we would check it, and then we would change it. And when we change it, we would check it again, and that would stay in the loop. So the change and the check till the condition would change, and then it would stop. And we talked about it, especially in the while loop, that if your changes doesn't affect your check condition, you can stay in the infinite loop for infinite loop. That means it's going to be in the loop forever, not coming out of it. You have to break out of it. Now, there is going to be some times that, remember what I said about the while loop, that if you set, same thing goes with the for loop. When you initialize it, when you're setting a stuff, potentially you might not even go inside the loop. In some circumstances, we want to execute the loop and then check it. So we don't want to check it first. We want to do something, then check it. And that's the do while. So we want to execute the body before checking it. So we have the set and change before we do the check. So we're going to look at that one. So this is very, very helpful for user input validation because you want to get the input and then you want to validate it. Of course, I was taught through software engineering not to use do while at all. So all my life in programming, I use while loop, not the do while. And any do while can be done with the while loop. And from the software engineering point of view, while loop is a better structure than do while, even though sometimes you get to write a little more. But we can do this as we were covering the book. So we are having a value outside of here. Remember, if you put it inside, let me bring this one up. If I put this value inside the loop, every single time it's going to be created and deleted, created and deleted. Now that's outside, it's going to be created only one time. So that's why we have that variable outside. So we are asking the user to enter an integer less than 100. We're going to read that integer. Now, if that integer is greater than or equal 100, we could put more condition on it. If we want to, then we're going to stay here. We're going to keep asking the user to enter it again. So we're going to prompt the user, we're going to get the input, we're going to check it, and if it's not what we are looking for, we're just going to go back up and do it again. Let me do something here. So we could potentially do the same thing in the while loop. So I could potentially write. So let me show you another way of doing this thing with the while loop that I am used to it. So let me copy this. And let me get a new slide. Okay, so this is a do while. Another way of doing the same thing is I would ask the user to enter this. I'm going to ask the user to enter it. I am going to read the value. Now I am going to have my while loop over here. I'm going to say while so I am going to say while that, I am going to do this one. So I am going to say error, not valid entry or anything in that matter that I want to mention to the user. And then I'm going to ask again, and I am going to read it, and I'm going to stay here till they give me a correct one. So you can see if I put it in the while loop, it's going to happen. This section is going to be repeated again here. So two things can happen. One is if this, the first time the user puts the correct so if the first time if the user put it correctly, then I am not even going into this while. And if the user doesn't put it correctly, I am going to be displaying a message so the user doesn't think, okay, what happened? I just put a number and then it's asking me again, what's going on? So the user has to think about it. But if I then give them an error, not valid entry or something like that, then they can, or I can say it has to be in the range of 100 or less than 100. Your entry is above 100. Some user-friendly code in there so we can let the user know. So as I am saying that do while is not my favorite, and I want to use while loop, I would say 100% of the time. And that's my style of working and my experience, and that's the way I work. Just giving you guys an example. So we have some self-check. I am expecting you guys to have a pen and paper to write it down. That way you don't have to go. I'm asking you not to use the IDE as much as possible. You have to use it, you use it, but just write it down somewhere so we can separate your thinking part from the coding part. So you have two parts. So when you're coding, your focus is on coding, you're doing your syntax, you worry about the syntax and all those things. When you're doing the thinking, you're thinking about the structure. We want to be sure we have everything, and that's why we have our designer now. So on self-check 616, we are saying to modify the do loop, and we want to say at least 0 and at the most 100. What is it that we have to change? The 17 is asking to rewrite the input check. Remember that this is going to be something we're going to be doing from this point on, that every time you receive an input, you want to validate it. You don't want to process your input if it's not validated. Just like in manufacturing, if I get a raw material, we want to check it to be sure it's good raw material before we process it. You don't want to go build a car and find out the material wasn't good. So that's for this one is do while using a while loop, and actually I show you that one already. Suppose Java didn't have a do while, could you rewrite the do while with the while loop? Write a do loop that reads integers and computes their sum. Stop when reading the value. Again, I'm expecting you guys to put a pause in here, write it down so you can think about it. And then you want to put it in your IDE and test it, that's okay. But the first round, I want you not to think about IDE. I want you not to think about, in there, just write it down. And the last one, I believe this is the last one, that the do loop that reads integers and computes their sum, stop when reading a 0 or the same value twice in a row. Maybe we can do this in the class together. So we are putting the numbers and then we are checking to see if the 0 is entered. So one condition is the user put a 0. The other condition is the same number has happened twice. That means what? I have to keep track of my previous number. So every time I read the number, I'm going to keep my previous number by setting the before I read a number, I'm going to set the previous to that number, then I'm going to read a number. So I have a current number, previous number. All right, I'm going to stop this one right here for now.